Good morning, King of Kings. It is so good to be here with you. It's been amazing to watch little kids get their first Bibles and high schoolers being able to bless you. Lots happening to be able to celebrate the Lord's Supper with you. And I think the fun's continuing because I get to preach on one of my favorite texts in all the Bible to preach on. It's the day the walls of Jericho came down. It's going to be fun. If you're new and you've maybe never heard this story, I think you're going to have fun as we unpack this one. But for those of us who've grown up in the church, we've heard this story over and over and over again. And so what I want to kind of challenge you to do is if you feel like you've heard it so many times, I want to challenge you to kind of try to re-enter into the middle of this story like you don't know how it ends yet. Like you don't know how it ends. And I think we're pretty good, by the way, at re-entering into things in the middle even though we know the ending. I remember one time in seminary, I got introduced to this television show, first episode, and this show was called 24. Has anybody out there watched 24 before? Yeah, it features Kiefer Sutherland, who is Jack Bauer, and Jack Bauer is maybe the older folks, he's like MacGyver for you guys, except without the mullet. And Jack Bauer, here's the premise of the show. There's 24 episodes in a season, 24 hours in a day. And so every show would be an hour and the clock would tick down. And every season, the premise was the same, is basically the world's going to end unless Jack Bauer saves the world. Now, depending on which season, saving the world would look different than others. But I remember watching the first episode while it had been 4 or 5 years out, but I just watched the first. I was I really like that show. I want to watch that. And so I wanted to binge watch it. And so I bought this thing back in the day called a DVD. Has anybody heard of that before? All right, before Netflix. And I sort of planned it out in advance. And my wife, Allison, was going away for a weekend while I was at seminary. And so I was cool, I don't want to study at all. I want to learn about a man that saves the world this weekend and enter into this 24 world. So I did. I was several hours into it, and it's intense. The clock ticks down, and as viewers, we get let in on things that Jack Bauer doesn't quite know, and so there's situations he's about to walk into that we know more of than he, and so there's times where you're nervous. And I remember his girlfriend, who also happened to be the Secretary of State, she was kidnapped and was taken hostage by these terrorists. And nobody could find her except for, of course, Jack Bauer, because he's awesome. And so he found her, and he found out where she was, but in the building that she was at, and he knew that she was being held by terrorists, being held hostage, but he didn't know what was on the other side of the wall. And so we knew, as viewers, he's got 2 minutes before she's gone. And so he called backup, and he said, hey, I need backup. She's here. And they said, great, we'll be there in 5 minutes. And Jack's I don't have 5 minutes. And so I'm going in alone. And they're no, Jack, don't do it. And I'm on my couch no, Jack, you don't know what's on the other side, man. There's 100 terrorists. How are you going to make it out? And yet he goes in. And so in the moment, I'm nervous. I'm biting my finger. How is he going to figure this out? But if I, peel back and get out of my 24 coma that I'm in, I can remember that, Zach, your friends are on seasons 4 and 5. Right? And this week you read that Fox signed Jack, thank God, to 2 more years of this glorious show. And so, it's going to be okay. And I think sometimes, as Christians, we need to remember, I think we can get into this world coma a little bit too much and all the stuff that's around us, and we're not sure how it's all going to play out. And I think what God wanted me to remind you of is it's okay to flip to the end sometimes and trust and know that you're going to be okay and it's going to work out. And the reason I mention this is because this is a 500-year-old promise that we're about to see happen. And so we know how it ends. And God even told them that this was going to happen. But I want to look at it today like we don't know the end of the story. And I want us to see how God comes through in a pretty powerful way. I think we're going to learn a pretty amazing truth about this. We're in this series. This is talk number 4 in this collection, The Quest for Life at its Best. And we've said the quest that all of us are on is will we experience what Jesus says we can have in John 10:10b. He says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the fullest. I've come that you might have Zoe, Greek word life, which means abundant life. And so Jesus, Zoe, represents something that can be possessed in the future, but also right now as well. And so one day we'll experience that fully in heaven, but like we can experience that full and abundant life right here and right now. And that's the quest we're on. Like, how do we get that? Because in this world, a lot of the middle worlds that we might feel are not words like full and abundant and happy and joyful and glad. So how do we get that? On this quest, we're using the acronym iPath sort of as a map to guide us. And so today we're on that fourth word in the acronym, trust. If you've missed any of the first three, we've got a great production team that produces video on our website and on YouTube, and audio, my favorite, Apple Podcasts. You can listen there. You can get any of the messages you missed, but today I really think is the linchpin of this entire series. And so we know that God has invited us into this life. It's not exclusive. Anybody's welcome. And so once he invites us into it, though, likely we don't experience that full and abundant overnight, but it's a season, years, decades, or maybe a lifetime of preparation. But then God calls us to act. And so will we act? We talked about that last week, but this week it's will we trust? And I think that's what this whole thing hinges on, is will we trust in God? Because on this quest, there's an adversary, an enemy. And Jesus actually mentions him first in John 10:10a before we get to 10:10b. He says the way he tries to keep us from this abundant and full life is to steal, kill, and destroy us. He's conniving, and he prowls, and he shouts. And I really think what he shouts out to a lot of us is how can you trust in the promises of God and in the full and abundant life when you look around and like you're not seeing what God says is reality? That's not your reality. So is this a God you're really worth? Is it really worth your trust? Or maybe he's holding out on you and doesn't have the best intentions, and so maybe you ought to like grab anything and everything that you can in this world and build your kingdom here and get it all now, because maybe you never will. And so the question of the quest comes to this: do you genuinely trust that God is true, that his promises are real, and that in him he offers the full and abundant life? We've been looking at Joshua, this incredible military and political leader that God put in front of the Israelites. And again, today is the day they're going to fulfill the 500-year-old promise that they would inhabit the promised land. This is the day the walls of Jericho fall. And so we're in Joshua chapter 6 today. But again, I want you to kind of hear this story as if maybe you don't know how it ends yet. Let's try to enter into the middle. Chapter 6, verse 1, it says, "Now the gates of Jericho, they were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in." Actually, several verses in the book of Joshua talk about how the previous inhabitants of the promised land, their hearts were melting in fear because of all the things they'd heard about God. And so Jericho, this powerful fortified city, is melting in fear. And so what they do, they built a wall so that God and his people couldn't get in. So actually, I want to build a wall up here today. I need 2 volunteers, preferably children. Are there 2 kids that want to come build a wall? We got some really cool big building blocks that are being rolled out right now. Is there 2 children that would like to? You guys are maybe, okay, come on. Just because you're so excited, the 2 of you. A little older than I thought, but that's okay. We're going to accept it, and we're thankful for your courage and your boldness for coming up and building a wall. What are your names? Liz and Alexis. Let's give it up for Liz and Alexis. Okay. It's pretty simple. You've got these giant blue blocks, and you can see these 2 pieces of pink tape here. You guys, over the next couple of minutes, get to build this wall however you want. But try to build it as big and mighty and strong and as powerful as you want it to be. Can you do that? I'm going to keep talking to them because they need to hear what I'm going to say. But I'm trusting in you guys that you're going to crush it. So awesome. All right, as they're building that wall, they're the Jerichoites in the story. Don't tell them that. They're the bad people, but that's okay. Maybe they heard me, I don't know. Verse 2 says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men.'" And I love that word "see," right? Look up. We're talking a lot of that language in this series, that we're going to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. But what I love is that God tells Joshua to see, I've already delivered them into your hands, even though he hasn't yet. The verb tense that he uses in Hebrew here is called the Prophetic Perfect. This is my favorite tense of verbs that God uses because it describes a future event or action as having already been accomplished, even though it hasn't. And I think what that shows us is that when God speaks, it's as good as done. It will happen. Now, how it happens and how it all gets played out, like sometimes we don't know that, and that's what we're going to see in this story today. So as God continues to talk to Joshua, you guys are doing great, by the way. Very straightforward, and it's good. I like it. As God continues to talk to Joshua, again, let's enter into this. So God says to Joshua, here's the strategy. Here's how we're going to do it. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. And on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Now again, let's remember, Joshua, he is the main commander of the army, and he's been the leader for quite a while now, and they've had 40 years to plan their attack on this powerful fortified city. I bet as the leader of that army, as the commander, they've probably strategized quite a bit. They've planned, they've talked about the ups and downs, the ins and outs, the pros and cons, and they've probably got a really great plan for how they're going to take Jericho out. And then God comes onto the scene and says, here's the plan. Isn't it easy sometimes as human beings, though, to get ahead of God and to make all these plans and lists and pros and cons, and then God's like, actually, this is what I'm going to tell you to do. And so oh, wow, you guys are doing really, way to fit that. It's looking good. You feel good about it? Is there much more? You keep going for another minute or two. You're good. Whenever you guys feel like we're as good as it's going to be, you can walk off stage and you have done your part, and I'm so proud of both of you. Incredible. I like the design on the top there. That's beautiful too. Little touches are beautiful. So again, let's enter into the room. We're on the cusp of something. I can just imagine God Joshua's excited and he's jumping up and down like, this is the day, this is the day. You're excited, aren't you, Joshua boy? Oh, yeah, God, you promised it. It's going to happen. We've talked about this thing. We have dissected this left and right. We know exactly how it's going to happen, and we're so excited, God. It's going to be amazing. I know you're excited, Joshua. I'm really happy for you. You've been spending a lot of time on that plan, haven't you? Yeah, I have. You feel pretty good about it, don't you? Yes, I do, God. It's going to be amazing. Well, Joshua, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take that plan and throw it away. And here's how we're going to take it. And you're like, oh, okay, but man, we spent a lot of time. But God, I trust you. Like, our plan is great. So, man, if you've got a better one, I'm ready to listen. And so he says, Joshua, here's how we're going to take Jericho. You ready? Yeah, I'm ready, God. Tell me. All right, we're gonna do a week of exercise. It's perfect. How did you do that? It was so good. I don't know where that came from, but that's beautiful. Exactly, right? I bet that's how Joshua felt. Cool, God, like, that's weird, we'll do a week of exercise, but then, like, when the walls fall down, then, like, we'll go in and we'll fight them with our fists, right? And God's like, actually, no, Joshua, we're gonna win this battle not with fights or fists, but Fitbits. God, I'm confused. Okay, so the wall comes down, we're walking, and then, we're going to give a cannon blast, right? And God's like, actually, no, I was thinking more like trumpet blast would work for this one. And if you're Joshua, you're like, can I just show you what we came up with? Because to me now, this is me, this sounds like the worst warfare strategy in the history of the world. We're going to take this wall, this city, with spears, javelins, swords, and a reputation accumulated over 100 years of how good of fighting they are, and we're going to take them out by Fitbits and trumpets, marching and shouting. God, that's terrible. I've had a lot of time to process this, and our team has too, and we like this. What you maybe don't even know is this is on the heels of a leadership decision in Joshua chapter 5 that also was a ridiculous plan. And I could have preached on this one today as the main text, but I spared you. Because in chapter 5, again, God's speaking to Joshua on the cusp of about to do this, and God's command to Joshua in chapter 5, verse 2, as the leader, he's now got to share this news with the rest of them. God says to Joshua, before you go in, make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again. Wait, what? Yeah, I want you to circumcise all of them. The babies, the teens, the adults that have been there for 40 years. Before we go in, you got to circumcise everyone. And Joshua is like, oh man, that's going to be a hard sell. At least I still have a really good strategy for how we're going to take Jericho over. What I need to do as a leader is I need to convince them, like, just go with me this one time. I know it's weird. And they did it, guys. They did this in chapter 5. It says they called the land Gibeath Haraloth, which means the hill of foreskins. And so I can just imagine Joshua after that. Like, that's done now. I think he's wasted all of his, like, poker chips in leadership to that idea. And now God says, we're going to march and shout. Now he's got to sell this. Like, sometimes as a follower of God who's a leader in this world, I think we can say, God, this stinks to follow you. I don't like you right now. But he has this plan. And I think the question comes for you, maybe in a little less ridiculous way at times, but will you keep walking, and can you stay obedient and faithful when you hear God's voice and direction in your life? Or do you think that your plans are always best? So verse 6 says, Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. And I think it's interesting what he actually doesn't tell the army the whole plans. I think he's a little embarrassed and ashamed to do that. So right now, he's just telling them we're going to march, and that's it. And then verse 8, it says, when Joshua had spoken to the people, those 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord, they went forward, blowing the trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark, and all this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, don't give a war cry, don't raise your voices, don't say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. I think he was saying don't talk at all, because I think if they talked, they would talk about Joshua. Like, this guy's crazy. Verse 11, so he had the ark of the Lord carried out around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Verse 14, the text says they did this 6 days in a row. And they didn't know the whole plan like Joshua. They would march and they would remain silent. 6 days in a row. And that may not sound like a long time, but on the heels of a few days of what happened in chapter 5, and now in chapter 6, like 10 days now, like of following this leader who's likely turned into a lunatic, that's a long time. And so, again, let me help you visualize and get in the middle. Spencer, I'm going to call you up. Spencer's my strong Israelite warrior. Let's give it up for Spencer today. Yeah. Spencer, you can stand right there. Spencer, as well, he plays bass guitar. He's also the president of our board, and so he would remind you, like Peter did earlier, let's get our votes in for the board next year, right? You would say that. And so Spencer's in on a lot of the planning, like Joshua and his inner team might have been, strategies. And so he's a good guy to do this. And so, Spencer, you are the strong Israelite warrior, and what I want to do is I want to arm you. You might have walked in here with swords and spears thinking that's how we're going to take Jericho, but instead I want to give you my Apple Watch, because we're going to walk, and I really want the steps added to my score. I got circles to hit, man. And then I'm going to give you this. This represents a trumpet. This is not actually a trumpet. It's a Venezuela from Venezuela. Yeah, exactly. And so Spencer is our strong Israelite warrior. He's going to walk in just a second when I tell him to walk. And so imagine Spencer, the warrior, going out on the first day. He doesn't know all the plans. Joshua hasn't told him everything, but Joshua said, hey, Monday, tomorrow, we're going to walk around the city. And so Spencer, like a good husband, you're married to Rachel. You went into your iPhone calendar and you put the event for the day, 9 to 10, take Jericho. Because that's what you were going to do, and you shared it with your wife so she could see where you were. And so on that day, that morning, you go out, and you walk around the wall once, and, you come home, and maybe you had lunch before, I don't know, but then you come home, and, you weren't sure exactly what you just did, and your wife Rachel's there, and she says, so, honey, how was your day today? And obviously as a husband, that when your wife says, how was your day today, it's code for tell me every intimate detail of your entire life story. But first, listen to mine. And I want to tell you about the kids today and what they did. And then I want to tell you about my trip to the grocery store and how I got rear-ended. But then I saw Sarah there, who is with Billy and Billy's son. Their son's not doing so great. We need to pray for them. But again, how was your day today? And you say, well, babe, I don't know. It was kind of interesting. Joshua, we just walked today. I expected to take Jericho, but we just walked. I think he just really wants us to get a lay of the land or something. And so, I just moved that from Monday over to Tuesday. We're gonna take Jericho tomorrow. And so you have a nice night's sleep. You wake up the next day, and it's Tuesday. And you get up and you walk around, and your wife's excited to see you because it's a big day for you. And so Rachel's there, and she's greeting you with a home-cooked meal. And, hey, baby, did you take my Jericho for me today? And you say, no, I'm not really sure what's going on, we're just walking. And it's weird, and I'm not sure why we're doing it. And, Joshua, he's a stickler. One of his principles is proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. And so maybe it's that. And so we're going to do it tomorrow. I said, okay. And so go ahead and do 4 more laps, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And this is your life. And you're walking around and not sure what's going on. And I think as humans, we can get going with a bad plan if on the first day, I think we could understand if a 1/7 of the wall fell down, right? And we were making progress and we could see that actually the wall's starting to come down. But the text says that nothing moved and nothing fell the entire first 6 days. This feels like a senseless act of obedience. And some of us feel that way in our walk with God. We're not sure of why we're continuing to pour into that relationship with that person if he or she's not getting it, and why we're continuing to reach out to that addict if they continue to fall backwards, and why we keep coming to church if there's still a lot of questions that we're not sure of. And so the question comes is, can we continue to walk, continue to be obedient, and to stay faithful even when we don't see God working, even when we don't feel God at work? And so on the 7th day, nothing's happened yet. You've got to walk 7 times now. So you better get started, because I'm on a time clock here, Spencer. And as he's doing this, let me read verse 20. This is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to act out in just a moment. On the 7th time after the 7th day, 13 times total, verse 20 says, when the trumpet sounded, and he's going to sound it in a moment, the army shouted, that's you're all going to shout in a moment, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave the loud shout, the wall collapsed, and so everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. And so what number are you on? 4. You got to keep going, man. Well, come on. He's on 4. And so Spencer, when he gets to 7, there you go. Now we're moving. When he gets to 7, he's going to blow on the trumpet, and right after he blows it, we're going to shout. You ready? Sounded like a dead elephant. Your 9 o'clock was so much better. Former trumpeter, aren't you? Oh, didn't you say you played the trumpet? Do it again. And you do it again out there, too. That was really good. Did you notice the wall didn't fall, though? So clearly we're messed up, because it probably should have fallen based on the sound of the trumpet and the quality of the shout. Can we try one more? Okay, one more. Let's see. Go. Still nothing. All right, let's give it up for Spencer. If you're like, shouldn't the wall have fallen down? I don't know. Like, we did everything we could. Oh, thank you for my watch. Appreciate that. I appreciate that. But the wall didn't fall because of a superior army. The wall didn't fall because of the quality of the trumpet sound and the amazing walks around. The wall fell because God wanted the wall to fall. And all Jericho was a celebration and a victory announcement. In fact, that was trumpets. That was their military function. It was to announce victory. And the trumpet was announcing that today is the victory, and today is the day we're inhabiting the land that God has always promised to give us. Like, seriously, think of this battle here. We have, again, I mentioned it earlier, Jericho with a history, 100 years or more, accumulating a powerful reputation with all of their weapons of warfare against people walking around with Apple Watches and trumpets. And who do you think Vegas would favor? And yet, God and his people won. And the wall fell down, and they stormed in. What are we reminded of in this story is that no matter how God gets his promises fulfilled, he will fulfill his promises. No matter what the middle looks like and how crazy and chaotic it is, even if there's 100 terrorists on the other side of that wall, Jack Bauer's going to make it. I'm telling you, no matter what happens in this world, God's still coming back, and his promises are still good. And so which promises have you given up on? What plans or visions or dreams has God put inside of you, but you weren't willing to take a leap of faith? You weren't willing to walk around the walls and just kept living life. And now that thing's like so far suppressed that God's trying to bring it up out of you again. If we fast forward in our people's stories, they continued, the people, to go over and over and over again trusting God. And in the book of Joshua, he shows up time and time and time again. But fast forward even more, and you would see that somewhere along the way, we stopped trusting in God. Rather than trusting in God, we trusted in our own plans and in our own ways. And in the midst of all of that, God looked down on this world and saw that there was no one righteous person, not even one. And so his plan is something that is so ridiculous that we would have never thought of it or enacted it ourselves. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my one and only son. While you are still sinners, he's going to come down into this world on a rescue mission, on a quest. He's going in this quest not only to become one of you, but he's going to die on a cross for you. He's going to take all of your sin, hoist it all upon his shoulders, and on that cross, he will die. And so on this quest that Jesus came on for us, like, he's going to take the worst of all the middle things that this world could offer, and he's actually going to die. He's going to take the most powerful enemy's weapon, death itself, and he's going to jump on that cross and die for you. But when I look at the cross, sometimes I see the crucified Jesus, but oftentimes I don't see him there anymore, because I see the crucified Jesus to remember that, like, he's there taking care of my sins, but I also see the tomb and the resurrection that came 3 days later, which is a reminder to me that no matter how crazy and topsy-turvy and weird and awful the middle looks, that God is a God who will fulfill his promises. And so whatever middle you're going through right now, do you trust God? Here's what I've seen, is that trust doesn't grow in comfort. It grows through vulnerability. And sometimes we, through our own mess, put ourselves in vulnerable places and discomfort, and sometimes through other people's indiscretions and sins, like that comes upon us because we live in a broken world. But here's the point in Joshua, is that sometimes God will lead you to a vulnerable place. I mean, the place he took Joshua to, I cannot imagine being put in that spot. As a leader, like, what are you asking me to do? And it's right after I did this for you. I went that crazy plan in chapter 5, and now I got this. But as hard and as vulnerable and as uncomfortable as those 10 days were for Joshua, Can you imagine being on the other side of that now? And seeing God come through, I can imagine just that it built Joshua's trust so much that whenever God spoke anything in the future, no matter how wild and ridiculous it was, Joshua was like, yeah, I remember that one time, and you were right, I was wrong, and it was amazing to see, and I want to see you do something again. And can you picture then the people that thought he was a lunatic on the flip side of this, how much they now trusted in their new leader? Like, we don't know why we were following him, but we did. We gave him the benefit of the doubt, and it happened. And so, man, this guy must really walk with God, and he's someone we can really get behind and that we trust. And so whatever he asks, we're with him. And so here's my challenge and my homework for you this week. Every week we have homework. There's a challenge. Last week, remember, it was let's get our feet wet. Let's take a step and then see if in that step, another step is more clearly revealed. Maybe, I hope that happened last week. And maybe they were revealed. And so here's your challenge and homework this week. Like the Israelites that day, like Joshua especially, I want you to take a leap of faith. I want you to place yourself in a vulnerable position this week and watch how God shows up. What does that look like for you? It could be a host of different ideas and different things. A few just to get your mind thinking. Maybe last week getting your feet wet was identifying who are the 3 or 4 people that I know really need Jesus. Maybe this is the week where you take the leap of faith and share your story of who Jesus is and how he's made a difference in your life. Maybe this is the week where you stop thinking about a serving opportunity and you serve. Maybe this is the week that, oh man, a cause has been pulling on your heartstrings and God's been so good to you and he's provided so much for you. And so maybe this is the week where you just give a wild, generous gift that the world would say is ridiculous. Maybe this is the week for you that for the first time, you'll take 2 hours one day this week and you'll read through one of the 4 Gospels front to back for the entire story. Because you realize that if one of those 4 gospel accounts, let alone all of them, is historically reliable and accurate, then everything changes. Maybe this is the week where you actually say the words, I forgive you, to someone that you have not been able to forgive. Maybe this is the week where you jump into an addiction recovery program because you know that the way you are living now, we're living, is not life at its best. I don't know what it is. Some of you might be tempted to think, well, in my plans, like I planned on doing the big thing like in 2024. Here's why you planned it that way, because it's really comfortable and on paper it makes sense. But sometimes God comes into your story and says, I love the overall idea, love your passion, but take a leap of faith. Why wait? Do it now. Somebody like, but Zach, what if people actually do these things? Like you're asking them to do a lot. And I would say, what if they don't? Too many of us in this room, and the reason we joined this 6-week quest to begin anyway is because we've recognized that life and life to the fullest, it's available to us, but we're not quite experiencing it. And I wonder how many for us that the quest stops right here. That I'll get my feet wet, but I won't take the leap of faith. I want you to take a leap of faith. Come on, let's stand in this place. We love the story of Joshua and Jericho and the walls falling because we love seeing and hearing walls falling down. In fact, some of you are really disappointed that this wall didn't fall down. Just be angry with me, it's not falling. But we love walls falling, and we'll sing about it and we'll praise God for it. But I wonder how many walls haven't quite come down because we haven't yet taken our leap of faith. Now in this story, like I'm praising Joshua and the Israelites for taking their leap of faith and for walking obediently, but like God is the one that gets the glory. And so take leaps of faith and praise God for you doing it. It's a valuable, it's a powerful thing. But when you take a leap of faith, you allow God to show up and you allow walls to fall down. And so all we're doing in this place is we're just committing to continuing to walk. And we're excited as we walk that God keeps showing up and God keeps showing off. And so if you're committing to continue to walk, will you just lift your hands in the air right now? If you're committing to take leaps of faith in this journey and you're like, God, I want you to show up. Let's worship our God in this song. And let's sing about a God who knocks down walls and who moves mountains. And he does it again and again and again.